Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football. I'm really caffeinated tonight, and my name is Eric Hansen, and he's Tyler James. Some of it's left over from Saturday night's 23-13 Notre Dame victory at Texas A&M and Kyle Field. And we're rolling into the home opener against Northern Illinois Saturday at Notre Dame Stadium. We've got all the latest from Marcus Freeman's press conference earlier today at Notre Dame Stadium. We'll have our analysis of what the next steps for the Irish need to look like, the bigger picture, personnel usage, and as always, we'll take your questions live and work them into the show. Start filling up the queue. Tyler's got all your instructions ahead, and we've got lots of good discussion tonight, all on
Football Never Sleeps.
All right. Well, if you are pumped up about the start to Notre Dame season, it's a good time to be a subscriber to us over on InsideNDSports.com. So give us a try with a 30-day free trial that's exclusive to our YouTube audience. Use promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend a lot of our time and share our inside information first. Also, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel as well, which is free. It allows you to get questions in during the live shows, and we're almost at 3,000 subscribers, and we appreciate all the support. First up for us tonight, Eric, is our opening drive, and that's our takeaways from Marcus Freeman's press conference today. Marcus Freeman, what I thought that was the most interesting was the discussion of his emotional display with the team that happened before the game. I think a lot of us saw him after the game, but I hadn't realized until we got back to the hotel and even more on Sunday that he was very emotional leading his team out of the tunnel. He explained how and why that was intentional. What did you make of Freeman's method and why it may have worked?
Well, I'll tell you what, Tyler, the aftermath of all that was what caught my attention during the game, how Marcus called the game, daring at times and being aggressive, and then the way he explained it in the post game, and even his voice cracking a little bit in the post game with emotion. And then to tie it back all together today in that this was part of the plan. This is not only who Marcus Freeman's becoming, this is what Notre Dame football is becoming. And I thought this is kind of what I've been waiting to see. I think this could be the next beginning of the next step. I don't want to overstate it, but I feel like this team has an identity, and their identity under Brian Kelly was a good one. They got back on the big stage, but often they would tiptoe there. Man, they weren't tiptoeing Saturday night. They were like, bring it on. And they had the good play and the talent to back it up.
Yeah, and no one was saying bring it on more than Marcus Freeman was as he was standing there with his players. It's pretty cool. Hopefully you've seen that. If you haven't seen that yet, there's plenty of clips.
Tyler does it to me before the show, and it gets me fired up.
That's why he's so caffeinated. It's actually just the energy that I impress upon him by yelling, let's go, before the show starts. Freeman, as part of his press conference, named MVPs of the game. Riley Leonard on offense. This is something that's been going on during the Marcus Freeman era. The MVPs that he named were Riley Leonard on offense, Xavier Watts on defense, and Mitch Jeter on special teams. Do you have any arguments with that? And maybe who else do you think should have been considered?
I don't have any arguments. I mean, I had to give game balls before the game ended. I kind of have to decide that. And I contemplated Riley Leonard, and I certainly contemplated Xavier Watts. I mean, Adon Schuler, certainly you can make a case for. There were so many people on defense you can make a case for. Marcus Freeman brought up Jordan Botello during the press conference, or at least answered about that. On offense, I picked Jeremiah Love.
Right.
But, I mean, Riley Leonard's stats didn't scream MVP, but the way he managed the game kind of did. And again, there were others. You could say Anthony Knapp. You could make a case for that, not allowing a sack against two of the best defensive ends in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, I thought those were good choices. And Mitch Jeter, if he brought that kind of performance to the press conference, I really would have been with him on that. But he had some very clutch field goals, and we
Yeah,
will get him clutch quotes here before the season's out.
yeah, he had a good game, but when they said Mitch Jeter was coming, I was like, Mitch Jeter? I was like, all right. Like,
How about Derek Jeter?
there were probably some people I would have preferred to talk to, but that's not to downplay the effort that he provided for Notre Dame, and was maybe it was more accurate in that game than we saw sometimes in practice. So when it mattered most, he came through for Notre Dame. Yeah, I think you could honestly make an argument for either of the running backs, either being Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, because what happens in the game if Price doesn't break off that 47-yard touchdown run when he did in the middle of the third quarter? Like, that seemed to really be a spark for Notre Dame's offense. And I know it wasn't like he was necessarily more consistent throughout the game versus Love or vice versa, but that Love was, I think, very consequential in the outcome of the game. Defensively, I think he could have gone a number of different ways. Maybe give a hat tip to Jack Kaiser for leading the team in tackles and leading all the young linebackers he's playing alongside.
And in that environment, I mean, he was the green dot most of the time, meaning the helmet communication was getting that interpreted well.
Yeah, and Jordan Botelho with his 6 tackles and 2 quarterback hurries. It was a really good game, and Marcus Freeman alluded to the fact that there was a good argument to be made on Botelho's half as well. Marcus Freeman told us today that he had a phone call with Jim Tressel, although he didn't name him. He just described him as his former coach. This morning, rather than the typical congratulations, Tressel had a message of warning that the greatest danger is the illusion that all is well when indeed all isn't well. Do you think that's an important message in a week like this?
I do, and I think Jim Tressel should tell some of the people on Facebook that too. It's like, they didn't want to hear that this team had to improve. It was a big victory, and I'm not talking about everybody. I'm just talking about a few people that are a little snowflakey. But no, I do think I'm really curious about how a team comes off of that, because you can't play at that fever pitch and you can't be at that emotional level the whole season. There's rhythms to the season. So what does the rhythm need to be this week? And I think we've seen in past times coaches fall down on this, both after a big win or after a big loss. Marcus certainly did his first year. Notre Dame lost 2 games in the Ohio State game. They lost Ohio State and Marshall. And then I remember Brian Kelly going into these types of games. It might have been in the 2018 season where they played Ball State and Vanderbilt, I believe. And he was like thinking, okay, well, how many 4th stringers can we get in the game? How many freshmen? And it was down to the wire in both of those games. And so I do think it's a very healthy focus for Marcus Freeman to say, okay, how can we improve and really bring it back to reality that this is not a finished product?
Yeah, I think you could also just go back and look through our game thread from Saturday night and sort of the reactions. That there's one thread that keeps getting responses to today that someone did a thread independent of the game thread and was asking what Mike Denbrock's buyout is. It's like, well, I think you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself, but it's funny just to see like the way the game evolves throughout and how your moods can change by the outcome based on, rather than maybe your reactions in the midst of it. But yeah, I think there's plenty of things that Notre Dame can improve upon. And I think there are plenty of opportunities to sort of highlight those in film review and practice this week that can keep Notre Dame moving forward in the right direction to make sure that a game like this doesn't get overlooked. So that was an interesting message, I thought, that Jim Tressel offered. I know some people feel different types of ways based about Jim Tressel's relationship with Marcus Freeman, depending on what you think of Jim Tressel. But obviously he's someone that Marcus Freeman values a lot and listens to when he finds the opportunity to get a chance to do that. In discussing the offensive line play, obviously that was something we spent a lot of preseason talking about. Marcus Freeman mentioned a couple of times that that the coaching staff can do a better job of putting them in a better spot. In particular, he cited a pass protection breakdown that left the blitzer unblocked, that ended up hitting Riley Leonard. And Freeman said that the offensive line made the right decision because Texas A&M did something that Notre Dame didn't game plan for. And so I thought it was interesting that he stood up for Riley Leonard and the offensive line in that moment. How important is it for Freeman to take that kind of accountability publicly?
Well, I think it's interesting more than anything else, but I do think that I don't know how high the antenna is up on some of these kids, but I bet it is with their parents and their families. So it's going to get back to them. But yeah, I do think it's important, and I also think that he wasn't okay. This is the Joe Moore award-winning line, and Riley Leonard is the Heisman Trophy winner at this point too.
Right.
But I do think that was really interesting to get that kind of insight into the process. It helps us understand. It helps us tell the story better. And again, I think the way that Marcus is handling this inexperienced offensive line and Mike Denbrock and Joe Rudolph, I would give high marks to the small sample size we have so far.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that for whether it's PFF, Pro Football Focus, that watches every play and grades every play for every player, whether it's us as reporters trying to analyze what Notre Dame is doing, we can have informed opinions about things, but we don't necessarily always know what is supposed to happen or what didn't happen correctly. So if you look at a play like that, it's like, oh man, I think Sam Pendleton should have blocked that guy. But no, if they had a specific call, he did what he was supposed to do. And in theory, Riley Leonard's accountable for that guy. Or there's a lot of different things that can happen that go into what we see as a mistake, but we might not necessarily understand the reasonings for. So I think that's a good reminder for it. But yeah, I think that Marcus Freeman has done a good job in showing confidence in this offensive line, but also protecting it. And I think the game plan showed that as well, that Notre Dame wasn't going out there playing like it had a Joe Moore Award winning offensive line either, and drawing up plays like that. And they protected it. I think they've done a good job of handling that so far. And I think it's something that will be obviously impactful throughout the rest of the season.
And it's the funny thing about it is, Tyler, if you're like in a different market and you didn't watch the game, let's say you're an AP voter and you were curious how the offensive line did, you would look at the stats and you go, wow, 0 sacks given up.
Right.
And they rushed for 5.8 yards a carry, which if you carry that over an entire season, that would have been 4th in the country last year at 5.8 yards a carry. And so there's numbers don't always tell the story, but I do think you can't completely dismiss those statistics either, but it's all kind of part of getting a feel for where this team is and where it needs to go.
All right. The last news item I wanted to hit from Marcus Freeman's press conference today was that starting wide receiver Jordan Faison is expected to miss 1 to 2 weeks due to an ankle sprain. How confident are you in Notre Dame's ability to replace him these next couple games?
Well, they had to do it more than half the game on Saturday. He had a couple catches before he went out. And they have a week to work on it with practice. Northern Illinois, you're playing a team that did a lot of things well in its opener, 54-15 over Western Illinois. Playing pass defense wasn't one of them. They were 90th after Saturday's games in pass efficiency defense. So I have confidence that they'll incrementally still improve with Jordan Faison out. I also think the game plan is going to be different. Marcus Freeman brought up this was about playing complementary football. It wasn't necessarily about throwing the ball downfield and pushing the ball vertically. in some of the games that are coming up, it will be part of that game plan. Can they do it without Jordan Faison? Yes. Would you like to have Jordan Faison for your best games? Yes. And these games that are coming up aren't the best opponents on the schedule, although, Northern Illinois and Miami are probably going to be peskier than people think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Chris Mitchell will be the starter. KK Smith should get some more playing time. Marcus Freeman even mentioned Micah Gilbert as someone that should get an opportunity, whether that's at that spot or maybe elsewhere. I just think, like, the first thought I had was like, okay, the good news is Faison's injury isn't long term, so don't move Jaden Greathouse out of the slot role. Like,
Right.
just like, I don't want them to. I think that hurt Jaden Greathouse some last year that he wasn't able to play in that position.
Right.
So it's good news that this isn't a longer term injury, and I think it speaks to, I guess we got to see how it plays out. But at least my confidence is a reflection of the depth that they have developed on this team. And so I think Notre Dame's in a better position to handle something like this than maybe it was last year. Obviously, it's a different story if the injuries continue to add up. But I still think that depth is certainly in a better spot than it was last year. All right, Eric, before we get to some questions from our viewers, we appreciate you guys sending questions, and you can continue to do that. How about you tell them about our friends at Autograph?
Well, we have a new partner, Autograph. You can now find Inside ND Sports content on the Autograph app, which is free to download in the Android and iOS stores. I guess that's the Google Play Store for Android and the Apple Store for iOS devices. The company, co-founded by Tom Brady, believes that devotion should be rewarded and the future of fandom belongs to the fans. And I can't disagree with that, Tyler. There are many cool tools and features in the app, including the daily replay, which summarizes the news from the previous day with links to content you may have missed. You can also download the app using the QR code at the bottom of our screen or by using the link listed in the video description. From there, go find our content in the Notre Dame community. Make sure you use referral code INDS for Inside ND Sports, but INDS. So Autograph knows we sent you, because that makes us happy and makes them happy.
That's right. So yeah, if you haven't checked out the app, I would encourage you to do so. I've spent some time on it, not only for Notre Dame content, but as a Chicago Bears fan, it's got Chicago Bears content. It has a bunch of the teams that you would want to be interested in, even if you're not just looking for college football content. But you can get our stuff over there. And I think it's pretty cool app. All right, let's get to some of the questions that you guys have submitted. There are a lot here. Let's try to keep some semblance of an order. Bob Oxnard asked, he said, "Thank God we won." Then he asked what it was like what it was like being there with the crowd noise. It was loud. And I saw Tim Brown tweeted today that I think it was the loudest crowd that he's experienced, and he's certainly been in some to plenty of Notre Dame games and with some raucous environments. I thought, especially, it makes a difference in those games if the crowd is into it till the end, and they were until the last 3 minutes when it became clear. I guess 2 minutes when it became clear that Notre Dame was going to win, but. Yeah, it was a pretty cool environment. Definitely a lot of pregame anticipation. They played a Kanye West song called Power, which apparently they had been playing in previous years, and they stopped playing and they brought it back. And I was still on my way back up to the press box when that happened. And so we're watching the crowd on the TV. There was a TV in the elevator. And the elevator is shaking. You can feel the press box shake that Carter Carls, our old pal, warned us about. And I was like, oh, he wasn't joking about that. I could feel it in the elevator. And then at different times during the game, you could feel that as well. So a pretty special place. Riley Leonard said something to the effect of this after the game about he looked up into the stands and couldn't see the last row. That was something I noticed when I walked in the night before at the midnight yell, when that part of the stadium is empty. It's just like man, that looks really tall up there in the end zones. They're pretty vertical, and certainly get a lot of people in there. I think off the top of my head, it was the fourth largest crowd.
Yes.
That Texas A&M has had at Kyle Field.
107,314.
So, yeah, a pretty cool environment, a special atmosphere, and certainly says a lot about what Notre Dame was able to do in terms of quieting them at the end of the night. All right. Jeff Stevens asks, Ben Morrison had to leave the game and his backup Leonard Moore had 5 snaps. Likely a good thing that Texas A&M missed the chance to target the freshman. Shoe on the other foot. Is this a forgivable coaching error?
Forgivable on Texas A&M's part?
Yeah, I guess
they didn't target him.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly.
Well, Tyler and I kind of joked about, I don't know if that was on the post-game show or if we were just talking, but that, maybe they were afraid of Leonard after hearing Ben Morrison's appraisal that Leonard was going to be the better college player at the end of their careers. But it was only 5 snaps, and I'm not sure that you want to just completely get out of your game plan if you have a better matchup somewhere else. It looked like Connor Wigman was having a hard enough time figuring out who to throw to and without having to pick on the corner. Had he been in there longer than 5 snaps, I think they would have picked up on that. And again, Leonard has played very well in the preseason, so I'm not sure that would have been the great pickings. But on a secondary that's good, you want to find any potential weakness you can get.
Yeah, I think that was a missed opportunity to at least and maybe they did recognize it and they didn't think it was that big of a deal. We don't know. But certainly I would have.
Well, here's the thing. Remember in the 2018 game, as soon as Julian Love was out, Clemson knew where to throw the ball.
Yeah. They were picking on Dante Vaughn, and Leonard Moore did not have to face that sort of situation. So I have not watched the reps. I don't know what the breakdown was in terms of pass reps versus run reps. And so if there were missed opportunities and maybe he could have provided good coverage. I have not watched it that closely to know. But yeah, you would like to think, at least on paper, like, hey, if you got a freshman cornerback going in there replacing arguably Notre Dame's best player, maybe take a shot his way. It's also the taking a shot part reminds me that there was a play where Connor Wigman thought that Notre Dame jumped offside, so he just sort of threw it downfield. I think it was a 3rd down, and just sort of threw it up for grabs, like as if there was already going to be a
3rd or 4th down. It was crazy.
Yeah, and so that was like, man. So I think that sort of speaks to like you got to make sure you see the flag before you sort of assume that you can just throw it up and let a free play happen. So there were certainly missed opportunities on A&M's part, especially in the passing game. But like we said, the secondary played great, and that's why you have to take advantage of those few mistakes that may come up. All right, Eric Swope said, I thought it was a huge X factor having Denbrock on the sidelines compared to the box. Your thoughts on the impact of having him right in the thick of the players and impact going forward?
I liked it when I found out a little over a week before the game that's what the arrangement, that the only full-time assistant up in the box was going to be Gino Gaduli. And knowing that they had the iPad technology on the sidelines, I really liked that. After having watched Mike Denbrock during preseason and how impactful he is in practice, you hear his voice over everybody's. I mean, he has the loudest voice. It's very purposeful. And so I did like that fact. He's been upstairs before. I mean, he's coached games from upstairs. Marcus Freeman today in the press conference said, you want to tailor it to the team and you want to tailor it to the circumstance. And this team, it just feels like this is the right way to go with that.
Yeah, I can't speak to like whether or not it would have made a difference. Like, could have everything have happened the same way if Mike Denbrock was in the press box? I don't know. I'm not sure I buy how big of a difference it is unless I were like explained it more. I don't like. I guess I don't necessarily know. I think it can't happen, in my opinion, if Mike Denbrock doesn't have a good relationship with the quarterback, right? Like I think that is a very important part because
And the quarterback's coach. I think his chemistry with Gino Guidugli
Sure.
and trusting him was a big part of
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, those things go hand in hand. That like Mike Denbrock can be the one that is down next to him talking about those things. Obviously, Riley Leonard can get on a headset to talk to Gino too, but yeah, there are that it's an interesting decision, something you don't see a lot, and I think I want to say it was it Al Golden? Someone said that it was like so hard to do it on the. Oh, it might have been Tommy Reese. Like he's like, I don't want to be down there. I think that was who it was. Tommy Reese is like, I don't want to call plays from down on the field. I prefer being up in the box. If I'm hopefully I'm not misattributing that, but I think that was someone has said like how more difficult it can be to call
when he was coaching with Nick Saban, I could see why he wanted to be up in the box because when he got scolded, it was more.
But I know some coordinators, they like to have a bigger view of things, and the iPads will allow Mike Denbrock to have that view from the sidelines down on the from above down on the sidelines. So I think that does make a difference and makes that opportunity a little bit different. I'd be curious to see if maybe the preferences change for people outside of Mike Denbrock based on the technology that is available to them. All right, Scott Fegan asks, guys, great win and hopefully just getting started. Defense was as advertised. What are you expecting to see offensively Saturday? More downfield passing? ?
I do think we'll see more downfield passing. I think that's something the team needs to work on. When you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, Notre Dame graded out way better in pass blocking than run blocking. So there's work to be done in the run game as well, despite that 5.8 yard per carry average, which was mostly due to home runs and not consistency. But I would expect to see more of it against Northern Illinois. Yes.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame, whether it's this game specifically or in the next couple weeks, I think needs to show a little bit more of that to give teams more things to think about throughout the game when you're planning to go against Notre Dame's defense. So, or Notre Dame's offense. So yeah, I do think.
Well, and it's also the offense they'll need to win in December.
Right. Yeah. I don't think Notre Dame's offensive game plan that they executed against A&M. One, I don't know if Riley Leonard can physically handle that for the length of the full season, right? Like they put Riley Leonard through a lot, and that's without him getting sacked. So I think Notre Dame has to be careful. But I think there's also like, hey, we brought Riley Leonard here for a reason. Let's use his skill set. And also Notre Dame has confidence in the quarterbacks behind Riley Leonard, but obviously would prefer that Riley Leonard be the one out there doing that. But yeah, I think the downfield passing game will slowly come along. I'd like to see a little bit more of that. And certainly Marcus Freeman alluded to the fact that he believes that is part of Riley Leonard's skill set. He thinks that Riley Leonard can push the ball down the field because it was funny because a reporter asked him a question today about like that they didn't do that, and maybe that's not one of Riley Leonard's strengths. And Marcus Freeman was like smiling while he was being asked that because like he
took exception to it.
Yeah, he definitely disagreed with the premise. And it also felt like he was like, wait till you see what we got cooking. Like it was almost like, hey, we can do more than what we did against Texas A&M. So I think Notre Dame's offense, at least from Marcus Freeman's perspective, maybe left some arrows in the quiver there as it relates to its passing game. And I think that's partially because of the offensive line, right? You just can't. There was not a huge confidence that they could protect Riley Leonard consistently to be able to throw down the field all the time. Like that's something that takes a lot of work to do and perfection to do to have that timing down when if you're not confident and you're going to be able to be protected for that time to make the throw downfield. So I think as those things develop, we'll see more of that. And you would like to think that this weekend could be the start of that.
I saw it out of the corner of my eye, Justin ND Troll Snipers comment about Beaux Collins. And I think this is a good point with that downfield passing game. A couple weeks ago, I asked Mike Denbrock about Riley Leonard's development and how it may or may not have paralleled Jaden Daniels at LSU. And Mike Denbrock said it did very much. And one of the key things was being able to trust the receivers and the people around him as much as he trusted himself to tuck the ball and do it himself. And I think that pass to Beaux Collins was an example of him trusting, because Marcus Freeman was telling him on the side, trust your guys, trust Beaux Collins. And he threw, a jump ball over on the sidelines. Beaux Collins went up and got it. Now, Beaux needs to act like he's been there before, too, when he does that.
Yeah.
Because he could have gotten a penalty that really hurt in that spot. But I think that's what we'll see more of as Riley trusts and gets to know these guys better. You'll see more of those kind of plays.
Yeah, and I think that's the hope is that Chris Mitchell and KK Smith are the kind of players that can stretch the field in that way. I think there's some ability for Beaux Collins to do that, but certainly Mitchell and Smith have greater speed that can maybe be utilized in those situations. So we'll see how that progresses moving forward.
And we saw the flip side of it. We saw a couple passes that Riley Leonard threw to players where there was a misread or there's a completely different interpretation on how the route was supposed to be run.
Right. Mike DeVoy asked, just curious, how did ND get down to 85 scholarships? I know this is a question we've been getting a lot.
So how they got down is they were able to do what a lot of people are doing in this gray area. Now, presumably it'll be allowable to 105 next year. There's still a lot of legal rigmarole that has to be ironed out before it gets there, but we're assuming it's going to be at 105 next year. So how do they get from that gray area this year without cutting somebody? And what they're able to do is they're able to use NIL money. And I'm throwing out hypothetical numbers. This isn't actual numbers, but let's say a guy was getting $50,000 in NIL money. You increase that to $120,000, and that pays his tuition and the other things that go along with tuition for the year. And so you are not giving him an academic scholarship, but his life isn't any different than the scholarship players. So that's what Notre Dame was able to do to skirt that issue. They weren't able to put somebody on medical retirement that didn't deserve that. They didn't say, hey, you're reverted back to a walk-on. You're really able to now legally play with the money and have more than 85. And then next year, everybody that wants to will be able to go up to 105.
All right. Jeff Stevens says, hearing no coach or analyst commentary on the subject, can we assume that the headset communication worked flawlessly?
Actually, there was quite a bit. It was the lead to my notebook today, was both the iPad technology and the headset communication. Marcus did talk about that. They thought that it worked really well and the team did really well with it. What was the challenge for them? And this is what they'll find out from the nuances of it, whether week to week it's a little bit different, is they know that it shuts off at 15 seconds, but when does it turn on? And if a team is in tempo, does that helmet communication turn on soon enough to send a play in? And so that's where maybe there were some hiccups on Saturday night, was maybe some inconsistency on when that turned on and not knowing how early that communication would be working. They certainly know when it shuts off. It's when it turns on. And the defense has to deal with that too. If a team is going up tempo, are they even going to be able to get the signal in from their coach?
Yeah, and I know there was a question on the Insider Lounge about this, that the subscriber noticed that Notre Dame was still had people signaling in plays from the sidelines, and especially at like Texas A&M, you have to have your other positions getting information in addition to the quarterback, because the quarterback can't necessarily yell loud enough for them to hear everything they need to hear. So there are still other hand signals and things going on beyond the headset. But yeah, it seems like for the most part, the headset communication is going well, and Notre Dame didn't seem to have any obvious issues with it. Although we didn't get, when I saw the video posted this morning from Fighting Irish Media of like the which mostly highlighted the final go ahead drive. I was hoping we were going to get that headset audio that we got in the Duke game last year, but we didn't get the headset audio this time. But it seemed seemingly the headset audio from Mike Denbrock to Riley Leonard was working, and Notre Dame likes what it's doing.
For those of you who watch the ABC broadcast, Holly Rowe certainly loved the helmet communication. She had a Notre Dame helmet and was listening in.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Access that Notre Dame gave to ESPN/ABC to allow them to get an understanding of what that sounds like and looks like in an environment like that. So
they should have given it to Lee Corso too, since he was the only one that picked Notre Dame out of the game day crew.
For the rest of the season, maybe he gets that.
Put it in his little leprechaun hat.
All right, Paul Kinlan asks, some analysts are predicting ND may very well go 12-0. Our last game is at USC. Are the Trojans as good as they looked last night, or did the defensive DBs of LSU play poorly?
I watched a good portion of that game last night. I wasn't super impressed with USC. I thought they had improved some on offense. I'm not
defense.
sure that,
you mean defense, right?
Defense, yeah. On defense.
I was going to say their offense is better. Wait a minute.
their offense wasn't all that good against Notre Dame last year.
Well, yeah.
But no, I meant on defense. I think they're much more sound on defense, but I need to see more of them, and they'll have a lot more tests before they play Notre Dame. But I think Texas A&M's defense is going to end up being way better than either of those teams. Now, I'm not sure about Texas A&M's offense, but I think defensively, A&M is going to be a much better defensive team than either LSU or USC. But Notre Dame going 12-0, I mean, that's kind of the reaction / overreaction. I think that's good for Notre Dame, but as they get into their schedule, I think people don't realize how big that USC win is or was last night. Notre Dame needs USC to have a good record when they play them, and Florida State too, to a large extent, because if that schedule looks, if Texas A&M, let's say, has 3 or 4 losses, and Florida State has a couple losses, and USC is not up toward the top of the Big Ten standings, that's going to hurt Notre Dame's perception, especially if they have a loss. So I know I went a million different ways, Paul, from your question, but hopefully I got the answer to your question in there too.
Yeah, I think USC's offense is talented. Like, there's gonna be talent there. Yes, they don't have Caleb Williams back there, and I think the USC offense is certainly different without Caleb Williams.
It's really different.
But they're gonna have guys that can make plays. So
yeah.
I think your concern is if USC's defense is better, which I think it's probably too early to say how much better they are. But
was good enough to get Brian Kelly to pound the table.
Yeah, and for those Notre Dame fans that are happy to see Brian Kelly not have success, it was another fine moment for them on social media and elsewhere that like to enjoy that. But yeah, I do think USC when Notre Dame plays USC, I think matters in this scenario, because USC will continue to progress when they have new pieces, and that I think you probably would want to play USC earlier this season rather than later, unless you're LSU, apparently. All right, I got one more question before we get back to some of the topics we've prepared. Eric Swope asked, looking at the game as a whole, was there anything that surprised you? For me, it seemed our guys were better conditioned for the game, not to mention looking more relaxed. Your thoughts?
Well, let me comment on your observation, Eric, who had parents that came up with a great first name. I expected Notre Dame to be well conditioned for this game. They were really leaning into sports science. I do think the really humid weather and the 90s temps in South Bend leading into the game was helpful. I just felt like they were prepared. That's why I picked Notre Dame to win the game. I picked them to win by 7. They ended up winning by 10. Was there anything that surprised me? I think the offensive line played better than I thought they would. Not a whole lot beyond that. How about you, Tyler? I thought
Yeah,
James Rendell was a little bit more nervous than I thought he would be, but that was to be, I guess, expected.
yeah. I don't know. I like the fact that I thought Riley Leonard not being as accurate at times was a little bit surprising to me. I thought that he would look a little bit better passing the ball earlier in the game than he did. I think the amount of pass attempts that Notre Dame had early on was a little bit surprising to me. Because I think we got asked on the podcast last week if we could foresee Notre Dame having 30 pass attempts in the game, and I think it hit 30 exactly. And they were on pace for way more than 30 at, like midway through the first quarter, or midway through the first half. So I think that surprised me a little bit. The conditioning wasn't surprising to me. I think sometimes it gets made out more than it needs to be, because we knew Notre Dame had depth. At least that's what I felt. So some of it could be just like confirmation bias. If I felt they had depth and they played well, then
22 players on defense.
Yeah, so that helps, right?
None of it mop up.
I think Emil Wagner played better than I had worried. And certainly I think the nights were more up and down for Anthony Knapp and Sam Pendleton, in my opinion, than they were for Wagner. I thought Wagner was more solid throughout. So that was someone that I thought was worth highlighting in terms of surprising. So yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind. Maybe to single out more players like Jordan Botelho. I thought he had a pretty good game. And like I've wondered if the Sun Bowl was maybe the start of more consistency from Jordan Botelho, and maybe we'll continue to see that.
He
throughout
actually
the
had a
season.
decent game against Stanford too, but the Sun Bowl and then this, and he had a good spring and he had a good fall. So it's going to be really interesting to watch him.
All right. Let's get to some of these topics I have for us, Eric. And let's maybe try to talk about the big picture. I know we did a little bit there when folks are talking about Notre Dame being 12-0 now. But given the outcome of Saturday night's game and the way in which Notre Dame beat Texas A&M, how much and in which ways has it changed your expectations for the Irish this season, if at all?
It hasn't changed my expectations at all. The fact that they won the game, they have a little bit more margin for error in their season. But, I think that September is going to tell me more about them, how quickly the offense can evolve. I think going into the game, the one thing that I was telling people when I was picking Notre Dame was, I don't know that the national media and maybe even some of the fan bases realize how good this defense is for Notre Dame, and they lived up to that. So they were what I expected them to be. The offense and how that evolves is still what's going to be really interesting about this team, and probably determine how far it goes in the playoff, because the defense is going to keep them in those games. Can the offense then complement them and win the games?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily changed the expectations. And I think those expectations are a little bit hopeful. But like I in order to change the expectations, it would I don't know that Notre Dame can win multiple games in the college football playoff. Like that was the thing that I'm still not ready to, going into the season, wasn't ready to say, and I'm not going to change that based on one game at Texas A&M.
They have the poise to do it. They just have to, they're like something that's not fully cooked in the oven. It still needs to cook.
Yeah, I'm a little curious. I'm a little curious of what Notre Dame's passing game will evolve into. I'm not sure that we've seen enough to draw conclusions from it. So I think that can move the needle in terms of what the big picture expectations are for the season. Obviously, continued offensive line improvement. I think those are the two biggest things that we've talked about going into the season, and I think you just need to see more of it in terms of if we're going to move the goalposts to get Notre Dame maybe further along than we thought would be possible this season. I guess we've talked a little bit about this already, but where do you think Notre Dame needs to improve the most in these next 3 weeks before Louisville comes to town?
Certainly in the cohesion of the offensive line, and they got such a good lesson from, I mean, when you open with a team like Texas A&M for the offensive line, then you have, okay, all this material to work with because you got tested in so many different ways. And so how those guys work together and come together, I think we've mentioned the passing attack and even the running game. I mean, Tyler, you look at some of the longer runs by Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, and yes, there were some good blocks thrown, and there were also a lot of Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love that went into those runs.
Yeah.
And so, the pass blocking grade or the run blocking grade from Pro Football Focus, and they revise it on Wednesdays. Their initial grade was in the 50s, which isn't very good. So those are all kind of the areas. I mean, the good thing, Notre Dame didn't make mistakes. They didn't turn the ball over. And I think that was huge.
There were mistakes in terms of some pre-snap penalties and some holdings.
99 yards worth of penalties.
So there are things to certainly clean up there. The offensive line play is an obvious one. And like we mentioned, just the passing game being more well-rounded would be something I'd like to see. Maybe a better.
And when Mitchell Evans is playing more than 10 snaps, that would help too.
Yeah, and I think that was a little surprise. Like Notre Dame did not give the impression that he would be as limited as he was. At least from my perspective, I would have assumed Mitchell Evans played more than he did. So I think he can obviously be an important part of this offense when healthy. And the other thing that I thought was maybe the front four can do a little bit better in terms of a pass rush. I know Stephen Robert had a question here. Is RJ Oben coming off an injury? He didn't look like he did when Notre Dame played him last season.
I'm not sure if it was Al Washington or Al Golden that said this. Maybe it was even Marcus Freeman, but one of the coaches during the spring, it was Marcus Freeman that said it, is that these guys come in that are grad transfers and we expect them to just plug in and pick up where they were with their old teams. They're learning a new scheme. And I think back to Javonte Jean-Baptiste last year. In the spring, we were like wondering if he was even going to be the full-time starter. And even as we got into the season, it felt like that was kind of a timeshare with Nana Asaf-Mensah. And all of a sudden he took off and he got the system down. And I think that's kind of where RJ Oben is now. Whether he takes off with it like JJB did is yet to be seen. But I think there was an expectation from the coaching staff that this was going to be a longer process than just flipping a switch. So no, not coming off an injury. But the hope is as we get into these September games that he picks it up and says, aha, I got this. And then he takes it and becomes that player that you saw at Duke last year.
Yeah. He was one of the players that I had maybe higher expectations for going into the game than what we saw. Obviously, it's a very small sample size. And like you mentioned, he's playing a different role. He's being asked to do different things. He's probably had some physical changes to account for how to play the position differently that's being asked of him. I think RJ Oben is someone that still has room for improvement. I didn't think that he played particularly well. I don't know that he played poorly, but he didn't sort of stand out in ways.
He did not stand out
to help Notre Dame. But I think I wouldn't write him off based on one game at A&M. All right. Getting back to the offensive line, Eric, I know we've talked a lot about it, but I was curious, what what impressed you most about what Notre Dame's offensive line did? And do you think, and maybe this is a stretch, do you see this as a group that can maybe become a strength by the end of the season?
Well, I'm copying off of Bob Morton's paper a little bit. We debuted his show, and it is his show. I am just the bystander on that show to feed him his observations.
He even came up with the name of it. That's how much of his show it is.
Into the End Zone with ND Zone in there. And he had some really interesting observations. The thing that was my biggest takeaway from our conversation was he feels like not only won't this offensive line by the end of the season be something that you're kind of holding your breath about, that it'll be an asset.
Mm-hmm.
I saw flashes of that. You mentioned Emil Wagner. I think Billy Schrauth played pretty well as well. I expect Ashton Craig to play better.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like their poise. That's the one thing that stood out to me. It just felt like it was a poised group. And just rewatching Marcus Freeman talking to those guys. Sam Pendleton is the guy I want to go to war with. I mean, he just seems like, all right, let's go get this. And I like the pluck in his game and the fact that he plays so much older. And now I can see why these two became the starters, because there is so much poise there. And I do see potential. It's just, I'm not sure how quickly that process moves itself along. And Louisville will be a good test, but I mean, these 3 games that are coming up are going to be really valuable. I know Miami's defense is good.
Mm-hmm.
They gave up 13 points to Northwestern, lost that game, but Miami was good defensively last year. They're going to be really good this year.
Yeah, the ability to bounce back from mistakes, I tend to associate that with veteran players. Like, I feel like the more you've been through, that you get the ups and downs that come with college football and playing your position. But Anthony Knapp and Sam Pendleton both, I thought, did a nice job of taking their lumps, but not letting that impact how they played the rest of the game. And like overall, the offensive line, I was impressed with how they finished. Like, the offensive line didn't play perfect on that go-ahead drive, but it did enough when it needed to create a lane for Jeremiah Love to spring free for that touchdown run. So I think that there is I guess certainly I've been as big of a critic or skeptic of Notre Dame's offensive line as anyone going into this season, and the line definitely played better than I feared it may. And there's still plenty of room for improvement. They didn't dominate by any stretch, but they showed reasons to believe that this could become something that is not necessarily a weakness on the team. I don't know that I'm ready to go after one game to say the offensive line can be a strength of this team. But if they can make it, if this unit can make it less of a weakness and an obvious weakness on paper, then I think that this offensive line deserves a lot of credit for that, because and the coaching staff for making the decisions to put who they put into the starting lineup and being able to manage that. Pat Coogan, I just know this because I was down on the field. Like, he gave like a pregame speech to the linemen before they ran out during warmups, and so he's not playing the role of being dejected for not being a starter, right? Like, he's embraced his role, and I think you got to give credit to those guys as well that have handled the situations that they've been put in if it's not in the starting lineup. And so I think reason to be optimistic about where this offensive line can go. I do think Mike Denbrock is probably going to still need to be smart about the game plan and not putting those guys in bad positions. But I think it's a good first step for sure.
And Jeff Stevens has your back. I just want to tell you that.
Okay.
He's your offensive lineman.
All right. We talked about Riley. So, let's get to some personnel usage things. I know you did the snap counts the other night. or the other day. It feels like night because of the lack of
Just
sleep.
blends into one day, goes right into the next one. You didn't even go to bed Saturday night. I know.
Yeah, no, I went to bed a little bit on the plane and then took a nice nap in the afternoon, and then I had a fantasy football draft to do, so I had to be lucid for that, and then came back home and slept like a rock after that. So, in terms of personnel usage, Jeremiah Love saw slightly more action than Jadarian Price at running back on Saturday. Do you think that should continue? And would you like to see more of them on third downs?
I think it's a feel the game kind of thing. And how each one is performing in a particular game. If they get into a good rhythm, keep the one guy in there, whoever it is between those two. I'd also like to see Aeneas Williams work his way into the rotation this week. They only went 3 deep, and Devin Ford played more than I thought he was going to. He had I think 4 passes thrown to him. He didn't get a carry. He protected well when he was in there. But again, flow of the game for me with those two.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Devin Ford was the biggest surprise that he was almost exclusively the third down guy. I just don't know that he gives them as much in terms of being a pass catcher and making things happen after the catch that those guys do. So you'd like those guys to be in there as options, but and I know I remember at least one poor rep in pass pro that Devin Ford have, but a running back's going to have that. You're not going to be perfect from the running back position. Even Kyron Williams, who was a great pass protector, had a bad moment or two every once in a while. Cooper Flanagan.
I'm reading the comments. Keep going.
Cooper Flanagan was the clear tight end 1 with Mitchell Evans working mainly on third downs. Do you think that's sustainable for Notre Dame until Evans is fully healthy?
I know that Mike Denbrock had mentioned how good of a camp Cooper Flanagan had, and he also mentioned him in the spring that was one of the guys that caught his attention, that Cooper Flanagan learned the playbook faster than just about anybody else on the offense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's kind of earned some trust with the coaching staff. And yeah, I think he's suitable. It does surprise me that he's ahead of Eli Reardon in terms of usage. But I do think he's good enough to hold until Mitchell Evans gets his snap count up, which was 10. That's the fewest snaps he's had in a game he actually played in since his freshman year, the end of his freshman year in the Fiesta Bowl game. He had 6 reps in that game. So, but he's coming back from an ACL. He's only 10 months removed from it. And so he was in for 9 pass plays and 1 run play in that game and was not targeted.
All right, a couple more before we get out of here. Howard Cross played more than any of Notre Dame's defensive linemen, but I was still getting asked questions about him on social media because Donovan Heinisch was playing quite a bit early on. Do you think it was smart that Notre Dame stuck to its rotations and leaned on its starters late in the game?
I do. I think they played it well, and I know that a question came up, though, about maybe there was a key third down when Jaden Osbury and Drake Bowen were the 2 linebackers in the game. I think they trust their rotations, but I think Howard Cross making playing the most snaps of all the defensive linemen makes sense. He's your All-American, and he didn't end up having the secret injury that he was rumored to have had. And I'll tell you, I mean, I feel for people that are readers because it's hard to be, somebody has a fancy graphic on their, Twitter feed or whatever. And you think, well, this is probably good information. That graphic looks pretty cool. And then they have, they don't even cover the team. I mean, I don't know, some people that aren't ever at practice or at games that are just reading other people's stuff or hearing rumors, and they don't have any accountability. Sorry, I had to get on my soapbox about that and pound my fist like Brian Kelly did. If only I had a Columbia jacket to do it in. But back to your original point, I do think it made sense. There were times last year where I felt Notre Dame didn't have its best personnel on the field early in the 2023 season when they needed to. The rotations kind of got wonky, and they were too married to that concept. I thought it was a good mix of trusting the rotations and yet put your best players on the field when it matters.
All right. Lastly, do you think, you mentioned the linebackers, can Notre Dame keep juggling the 5 linebacker rotation the way it did against Texas A&M?
If Jaden Osbury plays like he did, I think, there was some skepticism of whether that would be a 4-man rotation or a 5 and what those roles would look like. And I really liked how the linebackers played. Jack Kaiser ended up having 8 tackles leading the team, but there were pieces of what everybody else did. And Osbury's kind of been my guy. I get these football crushes, and Jaden Osbury was mine in the spring. And it was really neat to see him do it in a meaningful game. He only had 17 reps, which was the least of those 5 linebackers, but I thought all of them had impactful plays, and I do like that rotation a lot.
All right. Yeah, I wasn't sure that it would be as real as it was. And I honestly like Drake Bowen.
Well, I heard Max Bullough swear about it, so I was convinced.
You did. You're right. I would like Drake Bowen is someone that I hadn't seen do a lot in practice. Linebackers are really hard to judge based off the portions of practice that we see. Like linebackers are doing a lot of like, what is the football term for? I don't know. It's like reading React stuff, and it's just like a lot of walkthrough stuff, and it's like I'm not learning anything about these guys right now. So to see Drake Bowen get out there and make some nice plays was good. Like you mentioned, Jaden Osbury as well. Kingston Viliamu-Asa we knew was going to find his way onto the field right away. So and
Jalen Sneed.
I think we're starting to get a sense for what Jalen Sneed is, and like I think the question is like, okay, how much more does his game expand from where it's at? But I think he's continuing to progress and develop and be someone that's obviously a trusted member of that linebacker group. And so Jack Kaiser's obviously sort of the tip of the spear. I think that's his phrase going back to like the Clark Lee days, but that's someone that they really like what he can do with all those young guys around him, and they got a pretty cool thing going there. There's not really an obvious weakness on Notre Dame's defense, in my opinion, if they play the way they played on Saturday. So good luck to the opposing offensive coordinators and with the talent that Notre Dame has out there and the game plans that Al Golden's putting together. Notre Dame's defense is going to be a pretty tough unit throughout the season. All right. I think that's going to be it for us, Eric. Want to remind people it's a good time to be a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com. Give us a try with a 30-day free trial that's exclusive to our YouTube audience. Use promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a lot of our time and share our information first. Our YouTube schedule for the week, we'll have Inside ND Sports podcast uploaded on Thursday. Place your bets on Friday, and then we'll have our post-game takeaways late Saturday after the Northern Illinois game. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to help us push past 3,000 subscribers, and check out our content on InsideNDSports.com, and enjoy your week.